Hello race fans and welcome to NASCAR Video Magazine. In this and every edition, we take you inside and behind the scenes of NASCAR racing in a way that no one else can. I'm your host, Benny Parsons. Sit back and enjoy this very special volume in our Collector's Series. Now here's what we have in store for you. In a revealing interview, Rusty Wallace talks to me about his new, mature attitude about his life and career. We'll be witnesses to an emotional reunion between NASCAR driver Marvin Panch and the man who saved his life decades ago by pulling him out of a burning car. Now, far from the glamour of the Winston Cup, but no less intense, is the ARCA circuit. Now, that's where I actually got my start in racing. We'll spend some time with this passionate group of men driven by their dreams. In this volume, we'll debut a new feature, Benny's Corner. It's my chance to talk some serious racing and answer the kinds of questions I hear as I'm traveling the circuit. In this edition, I'm going to try to explain why it's a never-ending challenge to set up a race car for a particular track, no matter how many times a driver may have been there before. But first, in our cover story, let's travel the corridors of NASCAR history, past, present, and future, as we bring you the legendary men and women of the greatest form of motorsports in the world, NASCAR.
History, you kind of step back and look at it and enjoy it. History of NASCAR, you try to tear it down every week. Your goal is to outdo the guy that was there before you. Racers are greedy. They want to do better than the guy that was there before, and if you win a race, you want to win next week. You don't get to sit back and enjoy it very long. History of NASCAR changes every week.
Neil is right. No one sits on their accolades long in NASCAR. Hey, you'll get run over quick if you sit still around any of these folks. But as we look at the contributions to the sport made by the people we're about to introduce you to, I believe there'll be no arguments that each and every man and woman deserves to be included here. And ultimately, it's the people that make NASCAR as rich a sport as it is. Let's start at the beginning. No group of men personify the early days of NASCAR racing better than our first legends. They were the forefathers, the pioneers.
Fireball Roberts and Curtis Turner, Joe Weatherly. I guess those three were maybe comparable to me, Earnhardt, and Wallace. They were kind of the good, the bad, and the ugly, if you will. And they were real. Turner was a real partier, liked to have a big time, and Fireball was a real hard racer, and Weatherly, I guess he was, all those guys were jokesters back in that time. They had good sense of humor and a lot of fun. And Freddie was called the Golden Boy. He came along and Ford took him under their wing and made a superstar out of him. He won a lot of races, super speedways, and then he just kind of retired and went to Chicago and made himself a real $1 million up there selling real estate.
When I was a kid coming up, a race driver I always liked was Curtis Turner. You know, he was my hero back then, and you know, I classify him and Dale as being that type of driving style. You know, they could drive a car when it wasn't right as good as anybody ever seen.
They're the pioneers of our sport, and you know, they had to break stuff so we'd know how to fix it. And anytime you have people that, you know, it's just like Daniel Boone going across the country. It was pretty easy after you got cars and roads to do it, but I feel like these guys had a knack about themselves that was very special.
Those guys are the legends of this sport today because they helped create this sport. They helped give it the start, and they helped kind of fashion it the way it is. And so I think those are some pretty big names that there are others.
Roberts, Lorenzen, Turner, and Weatherly had a combined total of 102 career victories. But one of their contemporaries had more than half that number of victories on his own. His name was Lee Petty.
See, Lee didn't start driving until like he was 35-year-old. He was a driver that knew how much abuse the car would take, and that's what made him good. On the dirt tracks, he knew what would break the car, so he'd run that pace.
He was tough to race with. He could give anybody any quarter. They start beating on him, he beat right back, and sometimes he'd start some of it, I think. But, you know, I've seen people get out of the race and the race is over, and they'd come over and they'd be so mad at him that they just wanted to fight. They'd just be so mad at him, just chomping at the bit. He'd talk to them about 5 minutes, and they'd walk over, and they'd say, when they walk away, they say, well, we're sorry, we won't get in your way next time. So, you know, he had a good winning personality with that.
Drivers weren't the only influence on those early days. Mechanics were a force behind the scenes, and no one was more ingenious or outrageous than Smokey Unick.
One of my favorites is Smokey Unick. He was the Grand Marshal at Charlotte, the race I won down there in May in the Busch Card. I thought that was really neat because ever since I was a kid, I've heard of Smokey Unick and the cars he's built and the things he's accomplished. He's really, you know, people like him is what sent this sport in the direction we've gone.
One of the true pioneers of the sport, Smokey's mechanical genius led to many of the innovations we see today. Owner of the best damn garage in town, Smokey still does things his way.
He runs around the rim. He's a little more eccentric than some of us, but he probably wouldn't do anything if it couldn't be different than anybody else.
As the sport progressed, some drivers took what they learned behind the wheel and became even more successful as car owners, following the lead of Junior Johnson.
I don't think of Junior as a driver. I saw him drive a few times, but more of a car owner, more of what this sport was about 30 years ago, his reputation, how he got into racing. A lot of old racers ran liquor through the mountains of North Carolina and had fast cars, and that's how they got into racing. I guess if I think of that image, I would think of Junior.
Junior has done a very good job and been very successful in this sport. You know, he's got a lot of good people working for him, and he's got a lot of good knowledge of the sport.
We were racing Bobby Allison at Riverside for the championship, and I think it was '82. And Bobby had a bunch of flat tires. I mean, you know, he must have had 4 or 5 flat tires. And in typical Bobby Allison fashion, when the race was over with, he made some remark about Junior must have had one of those sharpshooters from North Carolina up there in the corner somewhere shooting his tires out. Junior said, that shows you how smart he is. If I'd have been shooting, I wouldn't have been shooting at his tires.
After 50 wins as a driver, Junior Johnson retired to become a car owner in 1966. His expertise has led to 136 wins for his teams over the last 27 years, earning him legendary status he doesn't think he deserves.
That, in their mind, in my mind, I'm just Junior Johnson, that's all.
For over 30 years, Bud Moore has witnessed every change in NASCAR. His consistency, durability, and laid-back attitude have made him a legendary car owner.
I can't imagine me being here another 20 years and being like Bud Moore. You know, man, he's just so cool about things. I'll be suicidal by then. It takes a special person to have that kind of commitment to travel when you drove everywhere. You know, you drove to Riverside, you drove to Ontario. You never flew anywhere. To have Bud survive all that and to keep grinning every morning when he gets here, whenever it is, 8, 9 o'clock, who knows, you know, and he's just a happy guy. You know, he's happy on the outside. I'm pretty sure he's happy on the inside because I think out of anybody, he's probably accomplished as much or more than anybody in this garage area.
While the guys from the Carolinas duked it out in the early days, a pair of brothers from Stewart, Virginia slowly earned a solid reputation as they revolutionized many aspects of the sport. But their family's impact on pit strategy is perhaps their greatest legacy.
They're in that category where Glenn was one of the original guys that started driving and became an owner, and Leonard Wood. I mean, as far as mechanics go, you know, I don't think there's a better one. And in the 50s and 60s, I don't think there was a better one. I don't think there's a better one now.
Leonard Wood, you know, what the Wood brothers have been able to accomplish, you know, not here in just NASCAR, but also by going to Indy and revolutionizing the art of pit work, you know, to what it is today. I think they were the teams, one of the teams that started it all.
As NASCAR entered the late 60s and early 70s, Bobby Allison led the Alabama gang to prominence. From the short tracks to super speedways, he was a courageous and intelligent driver.
He was someone that I looked up to, but yet he was so down to earth and and came to the grassroots of racing in the Midwest and took time to talk to me and help me with my career and those kind of things. I really looked up to Bobby and still do. I think he's a whale of a man.
Bobby Allison was a tremendous driver, tremendous amount of driving talent, but he also was a great car builder. He really started and changed the way Winston Cup race cars developed through the years, building his own cars and developing a new type of chassis, the front steer race car, which was predominantly used now in Winston Cup racing. Bobby was a fierce competitor. Don't get me wrong, Bobby on the racetrack was tough, very hard to handle. Off the racetrack, he was there to help you. You know, if you needed a hand, had a question for him, especially as a rookie like myself coming in when Bobby was in his heyday in Winston Cup racing. I could always go to Bobby and get a straight answer, and you know, that means an awful lot when you're getting a straight answer out of a competitor.
Allison's career was cut short by an accident at Pocono in June of 1988. But in his prime, one of his rivals on the track and friend all was none other than Timmonsville, South Carolina's favorite son, Cale Yarborough.
Well, when you mention the word legend, only one name comes to mind for me, and that's Cale Yarborough. I mean, I'm driving for the man, and you know, I mean, everywhere you go, everybody you talk to, you know, it's Cale Yarborough, and he's just been embedded in my mind, you know, here lately, and you know, I think what makes a legend is, again, you know, his aura. I mean, he walks around somewhere, he's seen, and you look at him, and I mean, it's just all those wins, all that big fight, all those things come to mind, and you can get impressions in your mind already just by mentioning his name. I mean, I think everybody's that way. They've got a picture of what Cale Yarborough is in racing.
As Cale continued to race, a young and brash rookie burst into the NASCAR scene. He was Darrell Waltrip, who took the sport into the 80s, highlighted by his escapades on and off the racetrack.
He's accomplished so much here, you know. He's won 3 championships. I think he's the
entire team, guys that work on my car.
leading winner of active drivers. He's won over 80 races, and plus he's had a flair about him. He's always been able to create some excitement and attention over his career, and those types of things, I don't think any driver starting out now will ever win 80 races. And so that number is one that'll stand up toward the top for many years to come. And winning 3 championships is quite an accomplishment too.
If nothing else, I got good timing. The sport was kind of in a lull with Petty and Yarborough and Allison and Baker and Benny and all those guys. Nothing really exciting going on. And so if there was ever a Mr. Excitement off the racetrack, I think I filled that bill. And kind of enjoyed it. I mean, I like to have fun. I've always enjoyed cutting up, having a big time, and I believe in taking risks, but I believe in taking calculated risks. I believe in letting it hang out if it's worth it. I believe that you can intimidate people just as easily by being crafty as you can by being crude. And so I've always tried to be crafty.
Darrell's has been one of the greatest race drivers this sport ever has had. His ability and uniqueness of the way he goes about racing and psyching out his opponents and stuff is really one of a kind type guy. So he'll go down in the history of this sport as one of the greatest races we've had.
With all these different personalities and characters comprising a complicated and sometimes dangerous sport, how did any semblance of order come out of the chaos? Well, that tough task fell on the shoulders of Dick Beatty, who was NASCAR's technical director for over 13 years until he retired in 1992.
Well, when you think about legends of NASCAR, you know, a lot of people think of drivers and flamboyant car owners and things like that, but you look at a guy like Dick Beatty, who went in as a driver in the very beginning, then became an official and really pioneered the officiating to what we know today. Took kind of a rolled up shirt sleeve t-shirt image and brought it up to a where it is today, the status of this garage area, and the things that he put into place are really building blocks that are the foundation of the sport. And that's down in the grease and the trenches what most people don't see, but definitely he has become a legend by the things he put into place.
There's another behind-the-scenes legend that doesn't change a tire, work on an engine, or even drive a race car, but is every driver's secret weapon.
I think the biggest talent in racing is the wives. To be able to stand there, support their husbands through thick and thin, through troubled times, hard times. They take the brunt of a bad day at the racetrack after the race is over, and they take the brunt of disaster on the racetrack when there's accidents and the worry and trying to hold the family together. When racing's over with, the driver's gone off on doing his public appearances, and the wife's left at home to keep it going and run the business. You know, they're probably the forgotten teammate, the forgotten person that really and truly makes Winston Cup racing a pretty good sport.
When we think of wives who've held everything together through the years, a lot of names come to mind. But the real leader of racing's royal family is Linda Petty.
Well, Linda started at a time that was the toughest in Winston Cup racing. The women weren't allowed in the garage. She was in the infield with the kids. We had it rather easy when we all came in because by then all the rules had been changed. So she went through all of the tough stuff by the time we were all coming in. So she's really helpful as to what it takes. She gives a lot of advice to a lot of us wives, what kind of strength it takes to be a Winston Cup wife, to handle the hours they're going, to handle the fear of them driving at high speeds. She'd lived her whole life in fear. But I think Linda's believes that you have to leave it in God's hand, because if you spend your life scared to death, you've wasted your life. You just have to take everything that's handed out to you and go on, or you'll hate this business and you'll never stay married because you could never survive it.
In 1979, when Linda's husband Richard won his 7th and final championship, it would be 13 years later until another driver, car owner, would accomplish that same feat. His name was Alan Kawicki, who took a mere 7 years to accomplish his ultimate goal as a true underdog.
Alan, being so focused and knowing what he wanted out of life, and he was able to go and accomplish it. And he started with nothing, and accomplished everything. And it's hard to really talk about Alan, because you know he did what every American male would love to do, and that's just have a dream and go out and achieve it.
A lifetime of hard work paid off for 1992 Winston Cup champion Alan Kawicki. Who could have known that his championship trademark Polish victory lap at Atlanta Motor Speedway would be his last, but would become his legacy as it has helped unite NASCAR Winston Cup racing. Even two competitors and rivals continue to salute Alan's spirit. His perseverance proved that if you want something bad enough, it can happen.
Open practice day, the day before we had to check in for a race there, and car was come off the pit road, went around the backstretch, and he pulled right out on the racetrack. He didn't know Alan was coming around through turn 1 and 2, and Alan come off of 2, and there's a car, pulling right up in the racetrack, and he tried to steer away from him, got loose, got into the guardrail, and the car flipped upside down, slid all the way down the backstretch on the roof, and we got over there to him. He was fine, but there was no wrecker at the racetrack, and we're standing there looking at this thing, how we're going to turn it over and so forth. And we got a tractor of all things and hooked a chain to it and turned this thing back over. Brought it back over to the truck and looked at it and thought, oh God, what are we going to do now? But everybody just pitched in. We went to work on it and fixed this thing and went out the next day and won the race. And I mean, that just proved right there, the kind of guy Alan Kawicki was, and the hard work and all the dedication that you just took on working for him. And that still stands out in my mind. I mean, there are not too many people who can say they flipped a car on Friday and won a race on Saturday with the same car,
Perhaps of all the contemporary drivers, the man who continues to write his own legend each season is the Intimidator himself, Dale Earnhardt.
Earnhardt will be a legend. you know, because of things that have happened to him during his career, because of the way he drives a race car, because, you know, he's come out here and you know, the great races that he had with in the Winston and stuff, and passing through the grass, and some of the things that have happened. You know, those are stories that people continue to tell and tell and tell. There's a lot of guys out here that have won 20 and 30 races, but there was nothing special about the 20 or 30 races they run, you know what I mean? So I think it's more what the stories are told about you than what you do on the racetrack.
Dale Earnhardt, you know, I mean, he's a legend right now. I don't think a future legend, but
Dale could possibly be the best racer this sport's ever seen. I don't like to category him as being the best because I think I've had some of the best. Cale Yarborough, Bobby Allison, Darrell Waltrip, now Bill Elliott, Leroy Yarborough. I've had some great race drivers, and in their time, when they was in their prime, I'd put him against any of the others, you know. So Earnhardt's got to be at the top of that list.
Earnhardt's championship pursuit, no matter how many he earns, may never surpass the ultimate legend to ever drive a race car, because this personality transcends any record in a NASCAR book. He's royalty. He's the king.
He won more races than anybody, more championships than anybody. He's done more for the sport than anybody. We all look up to him at how he did in his, especially his farewell tour. To be that patient with the fans, to be able to do as much stuff as he did, just gives us somebody to look up to. And to me, that's a legend. You know, that's somebody we're always going to remember. Richard Petty will always be Richard Petty. He's the same in the morning as he in the afternoon.
I first met him when I was 12 years old, and right then and there, I knew that that was a man from upstate New York was where I met him, when he was running Malta. And that day, I knew that this is what I wanted to do, believe it or not.
He set a standard for our sport that is being continued on today. You know, NASCAR Winston Cup Racing is noted for the fact that its players, its stars are accessible by their fans so much more than any other sport. And I think a lot of that is contributed to Richard's efforts early on in his career and continued on throughout his career right to the end to make sure that, you know, we all took care of the fans, gave the fans what they deserved on the racetrack as well as off.
I'm so glad and I'm so pleased that I got to compete against Richard when he was as good as he was ever, when he was at his best, and I was at my best. We went head-to-head on a number of occasions, and I won some, he won some. But, you know, it's just the image thing. I think that one thing we all come down to with Richard is forget the 200 wins and the 7 championships or whatever else he may have done, but it's his image. Even when Richard would do something wrong, people seem to be able to accept it and forgive him for it.
Probably the all-around greatest sportsman and driver that this sport will ever see. He's done more for racing than any one person I know of other than Bill France Sr. His ability to attract the fans and promote the sport is beyond belief by anybody, including me.
You know, it's just a situation, again, that you've been anywhere doing something for 35 years and you've been through with a lot of legends, then you sort of get bunched in with them. And it's a great feeling to be able to have people look at you from that standpoint, and they look at you from a legend instead of a has-been is a lot better.
While Richard Petty represents 5 decades of NASCAR racing, our final legend is responsible for NASCAR. He and his family are NASCAR. He's the true father of the sport.
Well, there's no question Bill France Sr., that they have the foresight and the thought that motorsports could be so popular in the United States and become a leader in fan attendance for the entertainment dollar. And he really and truly saw way ahead and was able to get the sport started in all the right directions so that we could continue it on and make it as successful as it has today.
He was the one that put it all together. You know, he didn't do it by himself. He had a lot of help, but he was the one that had the idea and then got out and got somebody else to do the work or whatever it was. So he's the one that put it all together, and the reason that we're here, you know, is because of him. I guess maybe if it hadn't been him, it'd have been somebody else, but he was the man that done it all.
Without his foresight or imagination, whatever you want to call it, none of this would ever come to pass. That's the basic reason. But he was just a unique person along with that. He He was one of a kind. You never see very many of his type of people in your lifetime.
Bill Sr., you know, definitely a legend and really responsible for this, for what we've got here now. So the Franz family, I'd say, played as much a part in this and probably more than anybody out here and has been out here, because without them it wouldn't be a NASCAR.
The list of NASCAR legends continues to grow, for each person who participates constantly molds the sport. Perhaps Kyle Petty said it best: a legend's a word they put with a lot of people, but only a few truly deserve it. Kyle, I couldn't have said it better. While we have just run down the legends of the sport, during the history of racing, there have been some heroic moments of legendary proportions. A recent visit with Marvin Panch personifies just that. The date was February 14th, 1963. The place, Daytona Beach, as drivers, including Marvin Panch, prepared for the 5th Daytona 500. Panch tested a sports car for another race at the famed Speedway. It was a day Marvin Panch and Steve Petrasic would never forget.
When I was in the car and trapped, everything I did bad in my life, which was quite a bit, flashed in front of me like a TV screen.
Marv was coming down the backstretch, and all at once you could hear a unusual sound, and we knew there was a problem.
The happiest I ever was when you guys finally jerked me out. I thought I'd never get out of that thing, and I started rolling on the ground. I thought, I made it. Hey, is this old Steve? How you doing, Steve?
Great, how the heck are you?
You're wonderful, it's good to see you. What are you showing up here for? You think you got to pull me out again?
We did that once.
Yeah, we don't want to do it again, yeah. How you been?
Good.
Wonderful, wonderful, can't complain.
Last time I had my arm around your shoulder, was you know where?
Where?
Remember the ambulance?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, right.
You leaned on me,
yeah.
I leaned on you.
How many years ago has that been now?
That was Valentine's Day, 1963.
63. Yeah, never forget. I've known Steve for a long time. Steve was with Firestone, and I always ran Firestone back at that time, so we were very close, or we knew each other very well.
Oh yeah, we worked together quite frequently years back. In fact,
did a lot of tire testing together.
Yeah, you
too.
remember you and I worked real hard on the refueling car for the Buick run. You remember
you
that?
remember that?
Oh,
huh?
how well I do.
Yeah. Well, how it all started, Briggs Cunningham, who had these birdcage Maserati, been running 24 hours over in Europe and all over, wanted to play with one of our Winston car Grand National engines in this car, give it more horsepower. So he's looking for a dummy to try it out and see how it worked, and naturally I had a volunteer. I was young and eager. So went out and practiced, and came back in and wasn't feeling too good, and Leonard Wood, who worked on my Wood Brothers car, made a couple little changes on the car, and we fueled it, and he said, be careful with it. And the first thing, I took a couple laps, and the first time I stood on it down the backstretch, the sucker got airborne. It came up, flipped over, and came on stop, and it slid into three and landed over by the tunnel there in Daytona, upside down.
I happened to be in the pit area, of course, measuring tire temperatures, because we could help set chassis by getting temperatures off the tires. And the tires that were running were the tires that I had designed for Monza in Italy. And Briggs Cunningham and I had worked together at Le Mans and other locations, so we knew one another, and that's how we got associated. Well, when Marv was coming down the backstretch, and all at once you could hear a unusual sound, and we knew there was a problem. And then we saw smoke billowing.
Well, all the way, even when it went up and came down on its top, skating along, I grabbed the wheel and pulled away as far as I could, and the heat from that rubbing, you know, didn't have much room in there on the pavement. It was starting to burn me already before I even got stopped. It just kind of wore it right on through. So yeah, I was very much aware of it. And then when I spotted that fire and wanted the guy to get it out, because I couldn't get out. I tried my doggone it. I kicked and frammed. They said you should be able to kick it open, but you couldn't kick that one open. So I was glad to see these guys. You know, that Maserati had the door.
The gull-wing doors, yeah.
On top, and I couldn't kick the doors open. You guys came in and grabbed it, and I got the door open, and I started out, and it blew. You lifted it, and started out, and a tank blew up on you.
Right.
And they dropped it across my back, and I can hear Steve's voice yet. He says, he's still kicking. Let's go get him.
Right.
Yeah. And,
you didn't hear what I said prior to that.
No.
I said, oh, damn, we lost him. Bow your heads and say a prayer, guys. And then I hollered, he's still kicking. Let's go.
Still kicking. Go get him. And then what Steve didn't tell me, I found out later that he went temporarily blind for a while after that from the fire.
I lost my vision for a while, and the doctors had assured me that it would come back. Some natural phenomenon that takes place, I guess, when you get heat against the eyeballs. And it hasn't affected me at all. No, I'm in good shape.
That was a nice award they give you guys, too.
Yeah, I got $500 too.
Did you?
Oh, yeah.
You never give me part of that.
Tell me about the award you got. Well, I got the Carnegie Award for heroism. In fact, I brought it here to show Marv. I don't know if you're interested in seeing it. I can pull it out real quick. This is an award that stands close to me in my life. It's something that I'll never part with. Picture of Andrew Carnegie. And on the back, it's inscribed with my name on, and it says, in the heroic rescue of Marvin Panch at Daytona Beach.
Oh, that was real nice. What's that worth? We mail it down?
Well, I don't know. Might be able to get a cup of coffee out of that,
right.
but it's worth more than that.
Yeah, you better believe it. Well, you looked after me, I know that. I tell you, there was you and, what, 6 other guys.
Yeah, there was Tiny Lund, Bill Wimble.
Bill Wimble, Tiny Lund, Jerry Raven, and, Bill Wimble's friend that drove up north, Eddie Gahan.
That's right, Eddie Gahan.
If it wasn't for you guys, I wouldn't even be here.
Well, I'll tell you, one guy couldn't have done it.
No,
it took all of us to pull. I wouldn't think the guys would be strong enough to raise that car up to allow me to crawl underneath. And,
no, that was great.
They were really doing it.
I'm glad you did.
Marvin, it's kind of a strange thing. The biggest and strongest guy was Tiny.
Yeah, and he didn't get in there.
He didn't get in there, but he sure saved us because he kept the fire from getting at us.
That's right. And then he also grabbed me, didn't he, by the leg?
Yeah, after I got you started through the door, he helped me.
Yeah, right. So, well, let's hope that never ever happens again.
Marvin Panch had 17 NASCAR victories when his career ended in 1966. We're going to try to introduce a new segment to the video. As I travel through the country, a lot of people ask me questions about auto racing questions they just don't understand, and I try to answer them. Well, I'm going to try to answer some of these questions that people ask me. First of all, we'll try answering this question today. Here's the scenario. A driver goes to a racetrack in April. He qualifies 3rd. He runs 172.6 miles per hour, pole speed 173 miles per hour. Now he goes back to the same racetrack in August, and he can only muster 171 miles per hour, and pole is 173 miles per hour. Where did he lose the miles per hour? Why was he not able to go back and run exactly the same speed he did the last time? Because in April, when these teams went to the racetrack and ran 172.6, the driver and crew chief, they wrote everything down on their sheets that the car had in it. What right front spring, left rear, right rear, all the spring settings were put on the sheet. What front stabilizer bar they had, that's in the sheet. What shocks they had, exactly what shocks they had, that's in the sheet. Where the rear sway bar was located, what holes it was placed in, that's in the sheet. How much horsepower the engine had, what camshaft the engine had in it, all that's in the sheet. How much compression ratio, everything about that car is written down. And they go back in August, and they can only run 171 miles per hour. Why can't they go back and run exactly the same speed they did before? A lot of variables. Number one, the racetrack has laid there dormant. The sun has shined down on this racetrack. It has rained a few times. That changes the racetrack. That is going to change the setup on the car. Besides, in April, it was 74 degrees. Now in August, it's 89 degrees. 15 degrees makes a great deal of difference to how the car grips the racetrack. So they have to adjust for that. And not every time do we make exactly the right decisions. And you'd think that a driver, after doing it 25 years, he'd say, well, okay, I know that 10 years ago, it was exactly 74 degrees, and we ran this speed, and we went back in August, and we set on the pole, and we changed these springs. But things change. 15 years ago, 5 years ago, 5 months ago, you had 10 horsepower less, or 10 horsepower more, or your camshaft was better at a certain RPM. All these things are what the drivers and crews have to fight each and every week in trying to find that perfect setup. You know, you think of a driver with 25 years experience. Why can't they do this? How are they not successful? And a rookie comes in, a Jeff Gordon, Bobby Labonte, or Kenny Wallace come in, and they have success. How are they able to do it with no experience? It's that feel of that day, and that's all we're talking about. You have to set up the car for that day. One of the most critical practices that any team faces is Saturday afternoon, right after the support race. We'll say that we have a 200-mile Busch Grand National race on Saturday afternoon, and following that race immediately is a 1-hour practice session for the Winston Cup cars. That's called happy hour. And that is the most critical practice that the drivers will go through, because the racetrack now is in the perfect racing condition. It's most like the condition it's going to be in the next afternoon. It hasn't been that way Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, or a month before that when you tested, or 5 months when you raced. It's not like that. It's changed. And that 1 hour after the Busch Grand National practice, that's when you need to get out there and feel that racetrack the way it's going to be on Sunday afternoon. And do you have to change? Can you use the same right front spring that you used before? Maybe you can't. Maybe you got to have a different right front or a left front. Or maybe all of a sudden you got to take an engine out and put less horsepower in, because you're spinning the tires when you get back on the gas. And you need an engine that doesn't have quite as much power when you get back on the gas. So you take the engine out, you put a different engine in. So many teams in that practice, they're not able to make all the changes that they want to make. And Sunday morning, some teams will actually change 4 springs, 4 shocks, and stabilizer bars just on the knowledge that they gained Saturday afternoon in that practice. And they take a calculated risk. They take a risk that what they're going to put in is exactly right. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But you see, the racetrack, it's an evolving thing. It changes every hour, every day. It keeps changing. It's not static. It changes all the time, and the drivers have to work so hard in trying to keep up with it. There's no place like a racetrack on Sunday afternoon, except on Saturdays, where at many facilities you'll find a support race in conjunction with each NASCAR event. At least 6 times a year, that event will be an ARCA Series race. But what is ARCA racing? And who races in the series? Let's find out. You know, if you look at the cars behind me in the garage area, it looks like a Winston Cup garage. Not the case. This is the ARCA garage area. With me, Bob Loga, the president of ARCA. And what does ARCA, first of all, what is ARCA?
ARCA, Automobile Racing Club of America. We're a Midwest-based racing sanctioning body, and we run all different kinds of races. We run from quarter miles, 3/8, the dirt, mile dirts at the state fairs in Illinois, and the super speedways of Talladega and Daytona and Pocono, Atlanta. It's a stepping stone for people wanting to get into Winston Cup.
Right, you know, and as far as my experience, I'm not ready for Winston Cup, and you know, if we run a year to an ARCA and it's basically the same cars, you know, same weight, same type race car, that you know, that's just good experience for myself and the team.
And I think this is the best avenue for me. It's not nearly as expensive as the Busch racing, and we get a lot of super speedway experience, and it's a good place to go.
I think the cars are pretty much similar. They're only 100 pounds difference. They're all V8s. I think it's just a good ground to learn how to draft and you know, learn about the similar type race cars.
Well, I just need a little bit of seat time. You know, when you jump out there with the Winston Cup guys, those guys run you ragged all day long. And with these guys over here, I got a shot at number 1, winning a race, and number 2, I get a lot of seat time. And car owners over there sit over and watch us.
And they're up on top of the trucks, and they're watching intently, aren't they?
Well, that's where we all want to be, you know, one day is over there. And the only way we're going to get there is to either do good here and just go right on up the ladder, or have enough money to do it yourself. And since I can't do that, I got to stay over here and drive a little bit.
Over there is the Winston Cup garage area.
Over there.
When I ran on the ARCA Series here at Talladega, there were several cars that ran good. You could run in the draft, learn from them. a lot of guys with experience, and then even like going to Atlanta and Daytona. Those places, it helped me incredibly. And I look back on that now and I realize that even though I didn't realize it as much then, it's played a big part in how my career has unfolded. The first thing that I'm going to do is advise whoever it is to go get some short track experience. And when they get that short track experience in the lower levels, then to try the ARCA series on the short tracks. And if they live in the southeast, then I'm going to tell them to run the Busch Grand National Circuit on the short tracks and get some of those races under their belt and get some experience before they ever go to any super speedway. And then, of course, if you're running ARCA, you don't have a whole lot of choices as far as super speedways are concerned. You got Pocono, Atlanta, Daytona, and Talladega. And I would certainly advise them to go to Atlanta and Pocono before they try to go to Daytona and Talladega.
Bob, who are some of the drivers, some of the better-known drivers that have raced in the ARCA circuit?
Well, Benny, you were one of the first great champions we had to come to NASCAR and did win the Winston Cup Championship. Then we had Ron Hutchison, Dick Hutchison, Davey Allison, Bobby Allison, his dad, Tim Richmond, Joe Ruppman, Lake Speed, Alan Quickie run a few races with us. Kyle Petty, first race Kyle ever won on a major speedway, he won. It was the ARCA race at Daytona. Michael Waltrip, Ernie Irvin. It goes on and on. There's lots and lots of them have stepped from ARCA to Winston Cup.
Bob, what would you say is different about the ARCA drivers, say, versus the Winston Cup driver?
Well, one of our older longtime champions, been champion 3 times, Bob Dotter. Here's a guy that works 6 days a week, most of the time, except when he has to come racing for a day or two. He's a diesel mechanic over in Chicago. But most everybody that we have, Bill Venturini, Ken Allen, they all got jobs. They work, 99% of our people here all work 6 and 7 days a week trying to make money to make their race car go.
But they don't make enough money with a race car, but they go out and earn money doing something else to put in the race car.
Right. I mean, here, if they got a good sponsor, they can come out pretty decent with it. But it's very hard without a good sponsor to make ends meet because the tire bills are very expensive. These tires over here cost them just as much as they do in the Winston Cup garage, but luckily, we run a little shorter races. They don't have to change them quite as often.
I own the automotive repair center in Tallahassee, Florida called ProMotion Motorsports, and I do a lot of custom vans for handicapped people and stuff like that. And wanted to go racing a few years ago, well, in '89 actually. Bought a race car, then went to Buck Baker driving school, and then now here I am. I've attempted quite a few races, made very few, but we're getting there. We're learning things the hard way. It's very expensive lessons, especially when you don't have the money.
I got a full service, old time gas station, service station.
A service station where they go out and wipe the window and may I fill it up and all that, right?
That's right. Very few of them left. It's a dying breed or whatever you want to say.
Well, just when it dies, you can go Winston Cup racing then.
I hope so. But I hope it don't die because there's a lot of people still like to have full service, you know. Not everybody wants self-service.
Who's all those people back there?
Those are the people that help me on a daily basis or at night on the pit crew.
Well, you guys all work for a living and just work on the race car at night?
Yeah, basically we're 8 to 5 people and we have daytime jobs and we do this on the weekends.
What do you do for a living?
I own an import salvage yard in Kansas City, Frog's Import Salvage.
Do you make enough money with that, Frog, to support the race car?
Well, I've got several people that help me just a little bit, so yeah, pretty much. We don't spend a lot of money. We buy secondhand Winston Cup parts and, you know, we do it that way.
It was 1960 when I first started going to the Mark races it was then, and I became a huge race fan. I started reading the racing papers, and in 1963 I started driving. And when I first started driving, I had this dream of one day running down south. But I was in Detroit, Michigan. How was you possibly going to do that? In 1964, ARCA started going to Daytona. They changed their name from Mark to ARCA in 1964. In 1965, I went to Daytona for the first time. And I said, you know, if I can just run good and win some races in ARCA, there might be an opportunity. In 1968 and 69, I was able to win a couple of ARCA championships. And in 1970, through that success, I was able to get a ride driving for L.G. DeWitt in NASCAR. An absolute dream come true, all through ARCA. So when I go through the garage area and announce all these people, It just reminds me of when, in 1963, 64, when I wanted to be a NASCAR driver, just like these guys, and trying to do it through ARCA. I made it. Question is, how many of these guys are going to make it? One of the guys who has definitely made it on the NASCAR circuit is former Winston Cup champion Rusty Wallace. This edition's Driver Profile. Since debuting under the guidance of Roger Penske in his first Winston Cup race in 1980 to his championship season in 1989, Rusty Wallace has matured into a car owner as well as a driver, teaming once again with co-owner Roger Penske in 1991. Wallace has begun to reach his prime on and off the racetrack as he demonstrated during his 1993 campaign.
Rusty raises the head and he wins the first Union 400. Rusty's going to come off turn 4 to score his 26th career victory. Rusty Wallace comes off the corner, takes the checkered flag and wins the Hooters 500.
I was real happy with 1993. Although I didn't win the title, we won 10 races, and that was awful important. You know, the 2 bad wrecks at Daytona and Talladega, we got out of that deal pretty clean. The second one obviously was worse than Daytona, and it kind of broke my rhythm there for 3 or 4 races after that Talladega crash. But I was able to keep on and winning races, and you know, we came on really at the end of the year and tried to run Earnhardt down, and I didn't get it. I got close, but all in all, I'm real happy with the 93 season.
The flip at Talladega, breaking the wrist, was that the first time you've been injured in a race car?
That's the first time I've ever been hurt in a race car. It's the first time I ever got any black eyes or a broken wrist or anything.
What does that do to you mentally?
Well, I got to tell you the truth. Mentally, the wrist was one thing, but I remember in the helicopter, it was like everything was going in slow motion. And I was so wide open trying to win this championship. And when I looked at my wrist and I saw it all bent around in a different position, I said, oh man, this is taking my championship hopes away. I'll never forget that. I was just so upset. I wasn't even concerned if I was hurt or not. I kept thinking championship, championship, championship. I'm going to lose it, I'm going to lose it, I'm going to lose it. And I did lose it. But I thought I was going to be out of racing for 3 or 4 weeks. And luckily I wasn't.
Was 93 your most satisfying year, or winning the championship your most satisfying year?
You're not going to believe what I'm about to tell you. This was the most satisfying year. There are a lot of tragedies happened this year with Alan and Davey. I gained a lot of fans back this year that I've never had before. The fans were very important to me. It's not fun at all to be sitting up in the grandstands and be getting booed. I don't like that. Winning the title and putting some money in the bank is one thing. People look at this big figure, okay? Well, you got to split the figure, give the car owner part of it, then you got to give the IRS part of it, and you end up with out of this big $1 million. You're not believing how much little bit of money you got out of that, okay? So it's not like Rusty gets $1 million. That doesn't happen. I mean, it was almost like $100 and some odd thousand that was left out of that $1 million by the time you gave it to the car owner and the IRS and everybody. So the money's not the big thing. When you go to Daytona and they say, Rusty Wallace, and they go, boo. Man, that gets you right here. This year, to stand up and you go, Rusty Wallace, and they go, yay. That gets you right here too, but in a better way. And so I like that part.
What started the booing? Do we go back to 89 to start the booing?
Yeah, definitely, 89. Before that a little bit too, a comment I made in 88.
What did you say in 88?
88, I told Elliott that he wasn't charging for it, and I wanted him to get up there and race me for the championship, and he was laying back. I was wrong. I was wrong in every single way. Every single comment I made, it was my fault. I realized that. I got a lot of the Georgia fans mad at me, and then I was wide open, rambunctious, never say die, throttle down the whole time, and I got into Darrell Waltrip in that wreck, and that was not what I needed after the comments I made in 88. Then I had the whole world on me. I knew down deep I'm a good person, but I knew that I made a couple of comments in the heat of the battle that I shouldn't have made, and I paid for it. And finally, the fans gave me a break, and they got off me. And I'm experienced right now, one of the most wonderful times I ever had in my life. And so the title wasn't great, but 93 was the best because I got my fans back.
What is it going to take to make Rusty Wallace?
I am driven to win. I don't like losing, okay? And maybe that's what keeps me so excited about doing it. But sometimes I look at things in a different way. I mean, we got all these pieces and parts and monetary things, okay? And you've done all this, think of entertainment. You know, when you got people got to entertain themselves, don't they? I mean, they always got to be happy with something. I got to have something going the whole time. But when it's all said and done, and you got all these go-karts and motorcycles and race cars and boats and crap and all that junk, you know, and you're listening to music and doing all this. Let's go out in the middle of a big cornfield all by yourself, okay? And you're standing nude. Okay, you're just a thing. You're a hunk of skin out there, right? Yeah. That's all you got, man. You're just a person. You're an it. And I get in an airplane a lot of times, drink a couple genuine drafts, get thinking about stuff, and I'll look down, and I'll see a gillion lights. They'll be twinkling all over the country, okay? And I look down, and I go, man, I'm smaller than one of those little twinkling lights. Exactly. You know? And so you really, sometimes you get so far out in this stuff, you got to stop and go, and get back in reality. And I've tried to do that. And I'm looking at life a lot different.
I see that you've become thoughtful. You're different. What's made the change?
There's been a lot of things. First of all, I've had a lot of things happen more than other people immediately. It hasn't been a constant little build, okay? It's been bam, Daytona. Bam, Davey loses his life. Bam, Alan loses his life. Bam, I wreck a Talladega. Bam, my wife gets scared, you know. Bam, bam, bam. It's not this little eating stuff. And it just kind of, boom, you see reality just face you immediately, okay? And it makes you think a lot quicker, you know. And all those little things that happened this year, just, man, it put 10 years on me, mentally, okay? Just like that. It didn't change my right foot, okay? It didn't change how hard I drove that car, or how bad I want to win, or never back my wins off. No, I don't think it did. 10 wins, okay? And I think I could win 12 next year. It just made me a lot smarter, made me think better, you know. Did a lot of crazy things, had a lot of fun, did a lot of things I regret, and I don't regret anything anymore.
Well, that will do it for another edition of NASCAR Video Magazine, the Collector's Series. Thanks for joining me, and remember, we want to hear the questions you want answered and the stories you want to see. So please send your comments to the address on the screen. Thanks again. I'll see you next time on NASCAR Video Magazine, the Collector's Series. So long.